All right, so this is the K7 Media video on how to prepare for the worst case scenario. All right, so some things we're going to talk about today is just going to be the importance of why you even want to prepare in the first place, how to do a risk assessment, and what exactly that's going to entail when it comes to you and your family. Setting up some emergency kits, bug out bag or not, bug out bag versus maybe a tote or a emergency box. If you're going to stay at home, if you're going to travel, what that would look like and how to prepare for that. Building a basic evacuation plan or just a plan for preparedness and what you're going to do in that worst case scenario. We'll get on to more of the fun, sexy stuff like shooting, moving, communicating, medicating, and then for all of you normal people out there, food and water, and how you can best prepare to sustain yourselves for an unknown amount of time. We'll look at how to prepare your home and your vehicle, which one is going to work best for you when you are faced with that unknown crisis. Is it going to be better to stay at home? Do you need to move? We'll look at some things to think about with both of those. So the first big one that we're going to hit on is building a resilient, adaptable mindset. Having a good mindset with a crisis that you never know when it's going to happen. You can only hope that you've prepared enough, and you're never going to know until it happens to you. So the best thing you can do is just make a plan. But along with that, all of those tangible things, you need to work on your mindset. What that means is just being resilient, being adaptable, being able to think logically in a time of stress, okay? And that mindset shift is going to be the one big thing that's going to help you the most and really set you apart from everyone else that you're surrounded by that's going through the same crisis. So the importance of disaster preparedness, right? Thinking about what it even means to be prepared. The number one thing is that right now, as you're watching this video, this is the best time to start thinking about preparing. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait until things are right for you, because you never know when you're gonna need that plan, that piece of kit, those few supplies that you didn't think about or didn't put the time towards to prep for. Okay, the next big item is going to be the fact that most people cannot afford to prepare everything that we're going to talk about at one time. So what that means is spreading this out. The financial game plan that's going to go along with being prepared needs to be well thought out too. Maybe you can put hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars to being prepared, and that's awesome because that means that you're financially prepared, right? But I want to talk to all of the normal people that might not be able to do that, and this might be the first video they're watching about being prepared. And so what I would like to say to keep it simple is cover all of your bases. Make sure that you've checked off every category and everything that we're going to talk about, and then upgrade, right? So when it comes to, food storage, maybe you start out with just some canned goods, right? Because that's a first step. It's just checking that box, right? So check the box that you're ready for food storage, and then maybe after that you can think about some different ways to upgrade what you have. Another way you could look at it is your tool set for your vehicle. Starting out with maybe some Harbor Freight tools, and then moving up to something that's more of a mechanic tool set that is readily accessible and can cover all of your needs that you might run into as far as maintenance and recovery of your vehicle up to a week or two at a time, right? So the big thing is just cover all your bases and then upgrade. Assets versus liabilities. This can't be understated. You need to take a good hard look at what assets you have and what's going to slow you down that's going to be a liability. With this type of game plan, with being prepared and getting ready for a crisis like this, you need to understand that the assets are what is going to pull you through and help you out, and the liabilities is going to be everything else that's slowing you down. So take a good hard look, either by yourself or with your family, and really see what you guys need to survive for an extended period of time that could be unknown. You need to set a realistic risk assessment. Like I stated earlier, all that needs to be is just what is the likelihood of this event or crisis that could happen, and then what would be the severity of it. Is it catastrophic? Is it dangerous? Maybe it's just minimal, right? And maybe in a later video I'll actually break down what that risk assessment looks like. That way you can really pinpoint what you should actually be preparing for. The next thing is just going to be making a plan. That plan can start right now as you're watching this video, right? Keep this video running in the background and open up your notes tab. And as you see something that, sounds like a good idea, or maybe it sounds like something you want to implement, go ahead and write it down and start making a checklist. That plan, it doesn't need to be a 2,000 word essay. It can be, a note to your wife or a note for you for a later time of, hey, I need to make sure that I can shoot, move, communicate, medicate, and get the food and water and the shelter, right? And just start with that basic outline. The next part with making a plan is, does it make sense based on your knowledge and your capabilities? Don't make a plan that is going to require you to go to all of these tactical, classes and schools that are popping up left and right? Start with what you have now. Take note of what you have at home, what you have in your vehicle. Basically just take stock of everything that you have and start from there, and make sure that your plan is coinciding with what you have and what you know. All right, next we're going to talk about understanding the risk that you're going to be faced with wherever you live at. And one of the first ones is going to be inhabitable, right? You are unable to live there anymore. So obviously that could require you to move, that you now need to start thinking about how you're going to move from place to place, right? The next one could be a tornado. Here in Kentucky, Tennessee area, those are a big threat to us. And you need to start thinking about how you're going to live if a tornado comes through and destroys half your home. How are you contacting people? How are you, signaling or communicating for help? And how are you living for, up to maybe 96 hours by yourself or with your family, waiting for someone to come rescue you? Next big one's gonna be flooding. Those hurricanes and all that stuff that comes through those southern states by the Gulf. Are you going to be susceptible to that? And what are some things that you need to be preparing for if, flooding is going to be a huge issue during parts of the season? Power grid failure. I don't think many people know how simple the power grid could be, getting knocked out. And that would be a huge unforeseen risk that if you're not prepared for, it's not going to be good for you and your family. Obviously, the last one is a zombie apocalypse. Are you ready for the next COVID outbreak? Are you ready for those World War Z creatures? Probably not, which is why you're watching this video. All right, so emergency kits and supplies, right? Building up to a 72-hour emergency kit. So, there's no minimum time requirement that you're going to be stuck in a crisis. And we're never going to know until it happens, right? This is where you really need to start looking at, how many people do you have that live with you? If it's just you, that's a lot different than, you and a family of 3, right? So that requirement for sustaining yourself, that can go to the left or to the right. and that could even be based on, you could plan for 12 hours in a bug out bag, but if you have to stay home, and help isn't coming for whatever reason for 72, 96 hours, why not plan for that? Why not plan for as long as you can to stay put or move if that's your plan? Ideally, whatever you have to sustain you should last you until you can get to a better location, right? If you plan to get rescued where you are, that may not work out for you. I mean, look at Hurricane Katrina and how that happened with all the victims of that hurricane, almost 20 years ago, and how the government took so long to respond to that. You never know if someone's coming to save you, right? So the only person that you can count on is yourself. And that starts right now. Are you going to stay at home or are you going to move? That's a big question you have to ask, because when you're looking at preparing your house, it's a lot different than preparing your vehicle. And ideally you have both of them prepared, but you need to start going off of that primary, alternate, contingency, emergency plan, and really start taking a hard look at, if you're going to stay home, what does that look like? If you're getting on the road, what is that going to look like? Ideally, you're not walking. So I'm mainly in this video going to talk about vehicle transportation. The next part with emergency kits and supplies is going to be stocking up on essential supplies. Some things that you need to think about is just going to be, power, right? Having that portable power. Maybe if you have access to a generator, fuel, for that generator for your vehicle. And then obviously, food and water. And do you have the storage allocated in your home to where it makes sense, where you can store that stuff? Maybe out of the way of prying eyes, and where, your neighbor Joe that lives across from you isn't staring into your garage where you have all of your stuff. So when that worst day does come, you don't have that neighbor thinking that you're best friends now when you've never talked to him before. And the last thing I want to talk about with emergency kits is just customizing this for your family, right? I'm not talking to all you single guys out there that are bored and watching this video at 2 a.m. I'm not talking to you guys, all right? This is for all the family guys out there, right? So for your kids, I know for my kids, diapers and wipes, right? Having those change of clothes, right? And then, the fun stuff, right? You got to bring the fun stuff, or it's not going to be a fun time for you, right? So talking about the toys, the crayons, the coloring books, even just bringing like a deck of cards. That could go a long way when, you could be displaced for 2 days, 3 days, hopefully not more than a week. Those cards and those little things, and maybe some pictures of you and the family, that could go a long way. And it doesn't take up a whole lot of room. So some good stuff to think about for the kids. And then for you, maybe the wife, maybe bring a journal, a pen, pencil, something to just kind of get away and, if time allots, maybe just writing down, a lot of the stuff that you're feeling, that you're going through. It might help, because again, you don't know how long you could be there. And you could also draw really cool dinosaurs for your kids. The next category is going to be an evacuation plan, right? So identifying some areas or points that you are going to move to if moving is the best option for you, right? And these need to be easily identifiable and pre-planned, okay? So what is going to drive those meeting points or those areas, kind of like those safe havens, is going to be your vehicle capabilities, right? And we'll get into the vehicle capabilities later on when we talk about the moving category. But wrapping up the evacuation plan is just designating evacuation routes, right? So we always do a primary, alternate, contingency, emergency route. Those routes are going to be based on a threat level and visibility. If you are in certain areas where visibility is going to hinder your movement, maybe you live in a big city with a lot of looting going on and during a crisis, you don't want to be highly visible. Okay, you want to stick to more of a low vis vehicle, colors, a lot of that stuff that's going to keep those eyes off of you. And ideally, the route is going to be the first thing that you need to think about. Taking those back roads instead of those interstates, right? And then your threat level. I'm not talking about just humans here, right? I'm talking about threat levels, and if a hurricane just came through and you're facing major flooding, that threat level is now water. Okay, it's not some redneck that just got his brand new AR, okay, and he's going to loot. I'm talking about whatever that crisis is, there is going to be a multitude of threats that are out there, and you need to plan for all of them. This is the good stuff right here. All right, so this section is going to be all of the, what you could call the sexier stuff. This is what everybody wants to actually talk about when it comes time to talk about disasters and crisis. And the first one is going to be guns, right? Can't forget about that. So when we're talking about guns, right, you need to understand that these are going to be used for self-defense, okay? And with 99% of the crises that you're going to come across, self-defense is going to be the number one thing, okay? You're not going out there to conduct a raid on somebody's tent at a campground when there's a, tornado coming through, okay? That's not what we're talking about here, okay? It's going to be mainly self-defense. And also hunting, right? Because if you're looking at, based on where you live, if you're looking at sustaining yourself for days, weeks, hopefully not months at a time, you need to really start thinking about bringing in food, quality food, at a sustainable pace that you and your family can live off of and survive. So for me, always start close and work your way out. So obviously a pistol, I personally am a fan of Glock, right? Glock 19, 9mm, nothing fancy, just a workhorse, reliable, and gets the job done, right? Next is what we're actually planning to get soon is going to be a AR, right? I'm not going to discuss it too much, but that is currently in the works, and we'll be doing a review video on that. So my longest range weapon is going to be a 6.5 Creedmoor in a bolt action platform, right? Also going to be doing a review video on that coming soon, but that's what we've got right now, all right? So kind of work your way pretty close to far out. You have the ability to hunt, you have the ability for self-defense. Those three weapons are tools, okay? And you need to start thinking in that practical sense of using it like a tool and not just something that you thought was cool on Instagram and you don't even know how to put your sling on. You don't know what optic you need based on your visibility and the threat level for your area. You need to start looking at these weapons like tools because that's what they are, okay? It's not just cool Instagram posts and stuff to show to your friends on the weekends, all right? These things are tools. They're meant to help you, okay? But you need to know how to use them, okay? So along with guns, just gonna be talking about ammo. Having the easily accessible ammo. Ideally, it's the cheapest price per round, okay? Might have to shop around a little bit, but you need to be able to get this ammo and have it on hand, all right? And that doesn't mean like super loose ammo. For those of you that don't know what that means, it's just where your rounds are kind of laying about, okay? You really need to look at how many mags you need prepped based on certain crises. And then you really need to look at where those magazines are going to be placed at, okay? Whether that's in your home or your vehicle, you need to look at this like the worst case scenario, which it is. And if you're using a weapon in self-defense, it's going to be too late to put rounds in your magazine. And hopefully that's not news to any of you, but if it is, prep your mags. Now looking at guns and transportation, right? The biggest thing, and not a whole lot of people have touched on this, especially in the gun community on social media, and I'm kind of disappointed in that, is the legality in different states. Okay, you need to be aware of where you could be moving to in your vehicle when you get faced with the worst case scenario. Because if I'm driving from my home here and I need to move 3 states away based on my gas range for my vehicle and where I'm trying to get out of that threat area, then you can still get a felony for a gun. Okay, so just have that in your head and use that information when you're building these plans, and know that the laws still apply to you. Okay, just because there's a tornado or a flood or your state just went to crap, there are still laws in place and you have to still abide by this. All right, so do some research, get on the Google box and start looking up those laws in the states that that surround you and where you're going to be going based on that evacuation plan. All right, so now that we talked about shooting, we're going to talk about moving. All right, so things to look at is just going to be basic map reading and land navigation. Right, if you don't know anything about basic map reading and land navigation, I'll put a link, all right, in the description below on some good sites to look at to really start learning the basics when it comes to how do I find where I'm at and how do I plot points and figure out where I need to go. Okay, there's a whole bunch of free information online. Just start looking it up and just start looking up the maps you need. Am I looking at like a normal street map? How do I navigate on, how do I navigate on those old atlas maps, right? Those ones that, when I grew up, those ones that your dad had in the truck, right? How do you navigate off of those and find your way when Google Maps might go down? All right, the next big thing with moving is going to be having a compass. Okay, you should always have a compass with you. All right, just knowing how to read a compass and how to approximately know where you are, all right, using a compass and a map is going to pay dividends. All right, when maybe your phone goes down, maybe a network crashes, maybe you break your phone because you fell in a creek. All right, it doesn't have to be all these end of the world theories, but maybe you just cracked your phone and you can't use it anymore. Having that map and that compass and knowing how to use it is going to be the big thing. Knowing how to use those tools could be the difference between life and death. The last thing with movement is transportation, right? Understanding the vehicle that you have and the capabilities of that vehicle. Talking about gas range, all right? Is it 4-wheel drive or 2-wheel drive? That's going to tell you immediately if you can use unimproved roads, right? So those rocky trails, or do you have to stay on a hardball road, right? Those are huge factors to think about when you're talking about planning for the worst case scenario. Where can you travel? Where are you going to be able to travel reliably? Also talking about the storage amount on those vehicles. Some people thinking ahead have the roof racks, great systems. Do you have the tie-downs for those? Do you have reliable ways to store your equipment and your food, your water, bringing more fuel, right? Do you have reliable ways to store those things? And if you don't, you need to start thinking about it because the stuff is not cheap. The last thing on transportation is going to be recovery, right? If you have a 4-wheel drive vehicle, self-recovery is going to be a huge thing because I can already tell you if you have a 4x4 vehicle, you already think that you can go down these rocky roads, you can cross that creek, all of those kind of things. If you have a Jeep or a 4x4 truck, I know you're already thinking about that for the worst case scenario, which is good. But if you get stuck, you need a way to self-recover your vehicle, right? And there's a huge long list of resources on self-recovery and things like that. So I just encourage you to do some digging on that. This is not Maxwell House, by the way. I actually have self-respect for my coffee. All right, communication plan. All right, so we're talking about shooting, moving. Now we're on communication. Okay, so setting up a family communication strategy. All right, the way that I broke this down is just near and far. Okay, so for near recognition and communication, thinking about a simple two-way radio. Okay, that could be used. If you're holed up somewhere or your family's staying at the house, they've got a radio. If you're going scouting, if you're going to, look for other people, if you're going to look for signs of life, anything like that, a two-way radio is going to be the biggest thing. The next thing with communication is going to be a VS17 panel. All right, and what that looks like is about a 2 foot by 3 foot sheet that is completely olive drab green on one side and hunter blaze orange on the other one. All right, and that can be a very useful tool when you're talking about signaling to people, to aircraft, anything like that, because it sticks out so well in urban and out in the woods, right? Talking about far recognition and communication is just going to be a cell phone, all right? I don't know enough on, those different types of radios. That's something I've got to work on, is really doing the far communication and how can we reliably talk to people that could be states away. All right, so I owe you guys that. Now I've got to do my own homework. Last thing with communication is going to be, creating a contact list and having addresses on hand. All right, so if your phones go down, maybe you can make it to your neighbor's house or down the street to your buddy a few miles away or whatever. Having that list of names, numbers, and addresses can go a long way, and it takes 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And that's the big thing that I'm trying to drive home, is a lot of this preparedness can get done in a night, right? Because it's those simple things. It's doing those little simple things before you need it that's going to help you out the most. When you talk about assembling a first aid kit, all right, think about it in 3 different ways. First, I got my boo-boo kit, right? It's going to be basic scrapes, cuts, little things like that. You got a little nick in your finger, all right? Little stuff like that. And that's for you and the family, all right? The next one is going to be what's called an IFAC, all right? Individual first aid kit, okay? If this is not your first preparedness video, then I'm sure you're already aware of what that is. But that's just going to be a first aid kit for you, okay? And if you're with a group of people or your family, each person needs to have an IFAC on them, okay? And that is going to be the first thing that you use when you're facing a medical crisis, all right? The next step after an IFAC is going to be an aid bag, okay? Now that can be a small backpack, right? That can be a fanny pack, but what you're doing with this boo-boo kit, this IFAC, and moving on to this aid bag is you're moving up an echelon, and you're also carrying more supplies than the previous one, and you're also covering more medical issues that could arise as you move up from a boo-boo kit to a full-blown aid bag. Talking about basic medical care. Talking about yourself, how do I take care of myself? And also, how do you take care of others, right? It's not always going to be just you, all right? Whenever you link up with that group of friends, those family members, all right, with wherever you're going, you need to be able to take care of people. You need to be able to be an asset, right? And have some knowledge and training is the big one, and know how to help out, know how to take care of people, right? So you guys can all sustain and survive together. Things to think about for taking care of yourself and others is going to be little things like sickness, food, water poisoning, hopefully nothing like food and water poisoning, because now you're starting to think about, vomiting or coming out the other end, all right? And that's where it factors into like your water supply, how much you have with water on hand. These medical issues, once it happens, it can go bad really fast, right? And you need to put this into your overall plan, because those things that you need to think about, you need to prepare for. So talking about sickness and food and water poisoning, and then talking about more of the trauma care. And a few people have probably heard of this, but it's called March, right? MARCH, right? And that's just a basic acronym, right, that the military uses for taking care of more trauma patients, okay? So the M is going to be massive hemorrhaging, and then it goes into airway, respiration, circulation, and then it's going to be head trauma and hypothermia, okay? And what that does is it's a super easy acronym to remember, and it goes off of a priority level for life-saving measures, okay? So if you come up to somebody that is unconscious or anything else, you can go in that order that I listed out, all right, those March steps, and attempt to save that person's life, okay? But you need to train on it. It's not something that you can just remember massive hemorrhaging and you have no idea what to do, okay? Which is the most important part of medicating is carry a tourniquet. Carry a tourniquet at all times. All right, the last bit of the goodness is going to be food and water, right? So food, make sure you have some for everybody in your little tribe, all right? Friends, family, whoever, the adults, the kids, the grandparents, everybody. Make sure you got enough food for everybody based on your plan of sustainment and how long you could potentially be moving or hold up for in your house. Make sure that you have enough food on hand, and then at least 25% more than that, okay? So start working that math for all you brain wizards out there. Now comes the interesting one, which is water. In the last bit, we talked about medical and medicating, and how some of those medical issues, when they do happen, you can really start tapping into your water supply, right? Whether that's cleaning cuts, cleaning scrapes out, hopefully not gunshot wounds, things like that, sanitizing. All of that is going to start dipping into your water supply. Not to mention cooking, right? So just boiling water to begin with, and that doesn't even include hydrating yet. Most people need at least 1.5 to 2 liters of water per day to survive, and that's just drinking. All right, so start doing quick math, the beer math in your head, and figure out how much water you need. Talking about home and vehicle preparedness, and then wrapping it up. All right, so looking at if you're staying home, right? If your plan is to stay at home, you need to start thinking about how to protect your home, okay? So you're looking at indoor and outdoor capabilities, security, things like that, okay? So some quick ones is going to be multiple locks on your doors, all right? So not just having the knob lock, deadbolt, or maybe the other little one that swings back and forth, whatever that is. Window locks, right? Make sure that your window locks actually work, all right? And then have a backup for that window lock, all right? There's some other ones that you can stick on the window and then it folds out, and it's not impossible, but it's way harder to open that window, right? Especially your ground floor windows, okay? Watch the ground floor windows. Obviously, that's where people can come in, right? You might have some ninjas that can go up the second story, or the zombies. So just prep those two, okay? Security system, all right? We've used a company called Vivint for 5 or 6 years now. Pretty good company. Not a whole lot of complaints there, but they are one of the companies that can install multiple cameras around the exterior of your home, and you can also have cameras inside, as well as window sensors and door sensors, things like that. Not going into a whole lot of depth here, but check out a few of those companies, and yeah, the power grid might go down. You might lose your security system, but this is a worst case scenario. A worst case scenario could be a burglary, right? It's not always martial law and a hurricane, okay? So look at some of those security companies, right? This video is not in any way sponsored by anybody at all. Right? This is just free knowledge. So take it with a grain of salt and know that nobody's paying me to say any of that. All right, another thing to think about is just creating standoff. Right? What I mean by standoff is literally adding more distance between you and a threat. Okay? So some things that can help you out with that standoff is going to be, your distance from your front door to the nearest street. Okay? If that means putting a fence in, if that means, having some more eyes on that area or that doorway from your house, having multiple avenues of visibility on certain areas where you expect a threat to come from, then that's fine. But you need to start thinking about audio and visual standoff from threats. The big thing with the house is going to be the layout. Talking about entry and egress routes and fatal funnels. All right. So entry and egress routes is going to be routes in, routes out. Super simple. Fatal funnels is where those routes turn into an actual threat area, right? So standing in doorways, standing behind windows, those are what's called your fatal funnels. And then also with the layout of your house is where you're staging your supplies and your equipment, right? If you have the ability to put it in a shed, put it in a basement, maybe the garage isn't the best place based on the visibility of prying eyes. And I mean your neighbors to your left and your right. They're gonna see what you have, okay? Maybe you can put it in your garage and cover it up with a tarp because you're only gonna use it during the worst case scenario. Getting into vehicle preparedness, there's a lot of videos on YouTube, social media about overlanding, about everyday carry on your vehicles. There's so much knowledge out there. I just push you guys to check that out and really get tuned in with the car scene. Get tuned in with that vehicle preparedness and that, prepping your vehicle as a way of not just transportation, but to live and sustain yourself for an extended period of time. Just stay hydrated. All right, so talking about vehicles, obviously fuel is the number one thing, right? So the range, right? The range that you can go on one tank of gas. Do you have any storage areas for reserve gas, fuel, whatever? Do you have ways to store more than what you can have in one tank? And then if you're planning lots for it based on where you're going and what's along the way, do you have a potential for refuel points along that route? That's where we start talking about primary alternate routes, is having points where you can actually refuel. That's going to be away from those big threat areas and all of that congestion of that crisis. Storage, we're just talking about truck or roof rack configurations. Some of those are pretty expensive. So just see what you have now with your current vehicle. No need to go get a truck or something crazy, but start thinking about how you can start to carry more of what you're going to need for that extended period of time. And a big one that a lot of people don't think about, they think about all the sexy stuff with the guns and carrying all the fuel and the water and the kind of crazy, ridiculous tent that's on every Tacoma. You need to start thinking about tools and maintenance, the basics. Do you have tools in your truck or your vehicle right now to fix 99% of your common issues? No one drives that vehicle more than you do. You know what's wrong with it. Do you know how to fix all of it? And if you don't, that's where the sexy stuff kind of ends and the realistic preparedness really sets in. Do you know how to change your oil? Do you know how to look at your spark plugs? Do you know how to tell if your spark plug is firing? Do you know what sensors are always on in your vehicle? Do you know if your battery, do you know how to tell if your battery still has charge in it, right? Those are the little things that you need to know. All right, just wrapping it up. All right, so some things to think about as we close out. All right, so just doing some drills and exercises. you could just do it as a weekend camping trip, right? Just bug out, go to the back 40 of wherever you live, and just try it out for 2 days. Stress the system and see if you're actually prepared to sustain yourself. And if you're not, perfect. If it's knowledge, start learning more. Get your head in the books, get on the Google box, all right, and start figuring out those things. If you need to buy something, that's the time to figure it out. If your tools failed, get a better tool. It can't be overstated that you need to practice shooting and medical. Those are the biggest things, with knowledge that you can't just learn in a week, right? Especially if you want to be good at it. Some other good way to make it fun is do it with your family, right? Do it with your kids. Take them out, on that camping trip. Take the kids out and just go camp for a few days, right? And bring all that stuff out with you. If you run out of food, water, if they get bored with what you thought they were gonna like, if they hate that one toy that you brought, then perfect. Now you know how to better prepare yourself and your family. Another huge one is preparedness and overlanding, camping, shooting, all that stuff is in the limelight a lot more than it used to be. And it's pretty cool because now there's communities that are, coming together, and people are building these communities and these local events and these social networks to talk about this stuff and learn and get together and plan together and do all this stuff together, right? And you can look it up on Google and you can find the information, right? But nothing beats that firsthand experience that you could gain by just talking to somebody, just getting involved with those organizations and just going out and meet people that have been doing this for a long time. Just start asking them questions, see what they've learned over the years and implement that, right? Learn from their mistakes. And I think you'd be surprised at how easy it is and how quickly you can come up with a really good plan. Along with the plan is just continue to revise your plan. It's never going to be perfect. Wherever you started at is fine. As soon as you take that first step to making a plan, that's where you're starting at, and that's fine, right? But don't let it stay there. Keep improving it, right? Keep building what you know and keep improving, your tools, keep upgrading, and just don't stop. The last thing I'll leave with is something bad will happen one day. Could be a burglary, it could be a flood, a tornado, a hurricane, martial law, power grid failure, chemicals in the atmosphere. Whatever it is, it's gonna happen. And when it does, if you're not prepared, it's not gonna be good for you. And this video, if you made it this far, this video is what you're going to be thinking about when you didn't prepare and you're faced with really hard decisions and a lot of regret when that crisis does come. And because you have to put a quote on everything, prior planning prevents poor performance. So start planning now. If you got some value out of this video, if you gained a little bit of knowledge or anything else, go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, get the comment section going. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you need some more videos about or some more knowledge, whatever it is, get in the comment section. Let me know. If I provided value for you, let me know. Let me know all the good, the bad, all of it. Thank you guys for watching. If you watch this whole thing, I hope you learned something. But get out there, get ready, make a plan,